Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to dive into a pretty radical idea. It's an idea that honestly shakes the very foundation of modern corporate training, and it goes a little something like this. Business schools do not actually hold a monopoly on worldly wisdom. So if you care more about dramatically increasing your real-world effectiveness at work than you do about a fancy piece of paper and a couple of extra lines on your resume, then you are in exactly the right place.
You might remember that iconic line from Good Will Hunting, where Matt Damon's character famously says you can waste $150 grand on an education you could have gotten for $1.50 in late charges at the public library. Well, that quote perfectly captures the rebellious, empowering spirit behind Josh Kaufman's manifesto, which we're analyzing today. It really challenges the ultimate value of those incredibly expensive, prestigious institutions. It asks us to just look past the traditional gatekeepers of business education and recognize that the knowledge itself is freely, or at least very cheaply, available to anyone willing to put in the effort to seek it out.
$150,000. Let's just pause and let that number sink in for a second. When you consider the sheer financial weight of a traditional business degree, it is a staggering opportunity cost. The source material notes that if you enroll in a full-time program, you aren't just paying tuition. You're taking on massive debt, sometimes equivalent to a $1,500 a month, non-deductible loan repayment for 10 straight years. Add to that the lost wages and the lost investable savings from taking 2 whole years off work, the true cost becomes absolutely monumental.
So here is our roadmap for today. First, the business school dilemma. Second, the personal MBA alternative. Third, core business principles. Fourth, people, sales, and systems. And fifth, taking action.
All right, jumping right into part 1, the business school dilemma and the true cost of a traditional degree. Let's really unpack the very real pain points of pursuing that traditional route.
When you stack them up side by side, the contrast is pretty wild. A traditional MBA might hand you a few corporate contacts, sure, but it also tosses you into a massive financial hole with a super rigid theoretical curriculum. On the flip side, the personal MBA, virtually zero debt, it happens totally on your own schedule, and best of all, you don't have to put your income on hold for 2 entire years.
Which brings us right to part 2, the personal MBA alternative, or educational entrepreneurism in action. This concept really champions self-reliance over institutional gatekeeping. Now, the crucial thing to understand here is that this isn't just some passive reading list. It's a highly active, entrepreneurial mindset designed to turbocharge your effectiveness at work. It's basically an experiment in educational entrepreneurism. You're skipping the classroom altogether. Instead, you're carving out dedicated time, diving deep into the material, and then, here's the kicker, going out and actually applying it in the real world to make great things happen.
To build this curriculum, Kaufman didn't just throw a bunch of random business books together. He carefully curated 42 books and periodicals based on 5 strict criteria. He demanded incredibly valuable, practical content that gives you a massive return on your invested time. They had to be self-learning friendly, meaning no professor is needed to hold your hand. They needed lasting reference value so you can return to them for years. And, as a whole, they had to form a comprehensive, unified set of core business concepts.
Moving on to part 3, core business principles and building your structural foundation. Let's see how this all comes together, starting with the absolute basics of commerce and strategy.
Every single professional has got to grasp the core financial concepts that actually drive a business forward. We're talking about the bare bones basics: cash, margin, profit, return on assets, and velocity. The source makes it crystal clear that understanding these basic mechanics isn't optional if you want to know how any company, large or small, survives and thrives. Now, rather than throwing all 42 books at you at once, let's look at 3 absolute heavy hitters from the core curriculum. Ram Charan's book is basically your patient coach for those fundamental mechanics we just mentioned. Then there's Blue Ocean Strategy, which completely flips the script, asking why on earth you'd compete in bloody, cutthroat markets, those red oceans, when you could just invent totally uncontested market spaces. And finally, Henry Hazlitt's Economics in One Lesson gives you that crucial lens of free market economics, so you can actually trace the ripple effects of human actions in the wider market. Part 4, people, sales, and systems, the human and operational sides of business. Because look, beyond all the numbers and economic theory, a huge chunk of business is just mastering yourself, influencing others, and optimizing the systems you work within. These standout titles remind us that business is inherently human. First up, you have to manage yourself. That's where David Allen's functional time management comes in. freeing up your brain to actually focus. Then, we hit a massive management truth. Based on huge amounts of research, you are way more effective when you lean into your natural strengths instead of constantly obsessing over fixing your weaknesses. And of course, Crucial Conversations equips you with the necessary tact to navigate sensitive, high-stakes issues safely, which, let's be honest, is a daily reality in any workplace. Just to highlight the sheer, tangible value of the books on this list, get a load of this amazing anecdote from the sources. Legendary investor Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett's longtime partner, picked up one of the books from this very curriculum, Robert Cialdini's Influence. Munger was so absolutely blown away by its insights into human psychology and how rational decision-making falls apart in sales that he actually gifted Cialdini a Class A share of Berkshire Hathaway stock just to say thanks. At the time, that was an $83,000 thank you for a $20 book. Insane, right? When it comes to the actual systems that keep a business humming, these next resources are total game changers. The Goal actually teaches you operations management and critical thinking through a surprisingly gripping novel about a failing factory. Then Lean Thinking completely unpacks the Toyota production system, showing you how to ruthlessly eliminate waste from your processes. And the 80-20 principle? That one will shift your entire worldview by proving that in almost any situation, just 20% of your efforts are producing 80% of your results. It literally shows you exactly where to focus your time for massive, massive gains. And finally, Part 5, taking action. Because reading is really only the beginning of your education. Books alone are not going to save you. Kaufman's core warning about this whole experiment is brilliantly clear. You cannot and will not learn business just by sitting in a chair reading. Books are fantastic for giving you the vocabulary and the mental models, but a full 2/3 of your learning, the vast majority of it, is going to come directly from your real-world day-to-day experiences. The daily grind is what gives context to everything you read. You've got to take these concepts off the page and go test them out in reality. So, knowing what we know now, that you absolutely do not need to sink $150,000 into a degree, and knowing that the greatest bargain on earth is a simple $20 book that fundamentally boosts your effectiveness, what's holding you back? You've got the roadmap, you know the criteria, and you have all the power in the world to direct your own learning. Think about it. If one single insight could radically transform your entire career trajectory, which book will you pick up today?